I had been married to Emma for over 25 years. We met in college, young and full of life. And like so many couples, we dreamed of a future filled with happiness and success. I thought we were happy, really happy. Over the years, we had built a comfortable life together. We had 2 children, a beautiful home, and a marriage that seemed strong enough to withstand anything. I believed in the life we had created. But life has a way of hiding the truth right in front of your eyes. And it wasn't until our 25th wedding anniversary that the perfect image I had of our marriage began to unravel. We had planned a small celebration with just family and a few close friends. Emma seemed more distant than usual, but I chalked it up to stress. She had always been the one to overthink things, and maybe the years were wearing on her. That night, as I watched her laugh and smile with our friends, I felt an uneasy twinge in my chest. There was something about her laughter. It wasn't the same carefree sound I'd known for so long. The next day, I stumbled upon an old photo album tucked away in her closet. Inside was a photo that stopped me cold. It wasn't the picture itself that was shocking, but rather the inscription on the back. It was a picture of her and a man I didn't recognize. Written in small, neat handwriting were the words, "To the love of my life, forever yours, M." M. That wasn't me. My name was John. At first, I didn't know what to think. Who was this man? Was it from before we met? But as I flipped through the album, I found more photos, spanning decades. They were taken at different places, beaches, cities, even abroad. Places Emma had traveled to, supposedly with friends or family. My heart pounded in my chest as the realization dawned on me. This wasn't just an old fling. This was something else. Something deeper. Something that had been hidden from me for years. My hands trembled as I closed the album, my mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? And why hadn't I noticed before? I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. I needed answers. The next few days were agonizing. I tried to act normal, but my mind was in overdrive. Every glance, every smile from Emma felt like a lie. I couldn't bring myself to ask her about the pictures, not yet. I needed more proof. I needed to be sure. I began watching her more closely. When she said she was meeting up with friends, I'd call her, only to get her voicemail. I'd check her texts when she wasn't looking, but they were always clean, too clean. It didn't add up. So one night, when she said she had a late work meeting, I followed her. I watched as she drove to a restaurant on the outskirts of town, not a corporate office or a conference room. My stomach churned as I parked across the street and saw her meet a man. The same man from the photos. They embraced, not like old friends, but like lovers. I felt sick. I stayed in the car, watching in disbelief as they laughed, held hands, and kissed like they didn't have a care in the world. My blood boiled as I realized this wasn't some fling or midlife crisis. This had been going on for years, right under my nose. When she came home later that night, acting like everything was normal, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. I confronted her the moment she stepped through the door. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice shaking with rage. Emma's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I held up one of the photos I had taken from the album. "This. Who is this man?" Her eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it. But then her shoulders slumped, and she let out a heavy sigh. "John, I can explain." But I didn't want explanations. Not then. I wanted the truth, the ugly, bitter truth that she had kept from me for so long. Over the next hour, the story unfolded like a nightmare I couldn't escape from. His name was Michael, a man she had met at her first job 20 years ago. They had started out as friends, but it quickly grew into something more. At first, it was just flirtation, something she claimed wasn't serious. But then it became physical, emotional, an affair that had stretched on for 2 decades, 20 years. She had been living a double life for longer than I could even comprehend. While I had been building a family, a home, a future with her, she had been sharing those moments with someone else. Every anniversary, every vacation, every intimate moment we shared had been tainted by her betrayal. "How could you do this to me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "How could you lie to me for so long?" Tears streamed down her face as she apologized, but the words felt empty. She swore that she had never meant to hurt me, that she still loved me, But how could I believe that now? Every word felt like a slap in the face. I don't even know who you are anymore, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. She tried to reach out, but I couldn't stand to look at her. I left the house that night, driving aimlessly for hours, my mind consumed with anger and grief. I didn't know where to go or what to do. The life I had known for 25 years had just crumbled before my eyes, and I had no idea how to rebuild it. But as I drove, something else began to take root in my mind, a dark, simmering desire for revenge. In the days that followed, I tried to make sense of it all. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. Emma and Michael, laughing, kissing, living a life that should have been ours. I was consumed with rage, but alongside the anger, there was something deeper. It was the betrayal, the years of being lied to, of being made a fool of. I felt like I had been blind for 2 decades, living in a bubble of trust that she had shattered. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't just walk away from this. I couldn't just let her and Michael get away with what they'd done. They had stolen years of my life, years that I would never get back. I had to do something to make them feel the same pain they had inflicted on me. That's when the idea of revenge took hold. It wasn't just about getting back at her. It was about making her realize what she had done, making her suffer for the lies, the betrayal, and the years she had spent deceiving me. But it couldn't be something simple, something rash. It had to be calculated, planned. I wanted to hurt her in a way that would cut as deep as her betrayal had cut me. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I didn't care. I was willing to do whatever it took. That I began to plot. I didn't just want to expose the affair. I wanted to destroy the life she had built with him, the secret life she thought she could keep hidden forever. Emma and Michael had spent years living this fantasy, and I was about to turn it into a nightmare. First, I needed more information. I started by going through Emma's phone, her emails, anything I could find. I discovered that she had created a separate email account just for communicating with Michael. The messages I found were sickening, long, detailed exchanges about their time together, plans for secret trips, and messages filled with affection that should have been reserved for me. But I didn't stop there. I hired a private investigator to dig into Michael's life. I wanted to know everything about him, his family, his job, his secrets. If I was going to take them down, I needed to know what I was up against. What I found out was more than I expected. Michael was married. He had a wife and children of his own, living in another city. He was living the same double life as Emma, juggling 2 families, 2 sets of lies. That's when I knew I had my angle. I wasn't just going to expose the affair, I was going to ruin him. When I found out about Michael's wife, I knew I had my weapon. I wasn't the only one who had been deceived, and if I played my cards right, I could destroy both their lives in one move. Her name was Laura, and she had no idea what was happening behind her back. I thought about how to approach her, how to break the news in a way that would ensure maximum devastation. I didn't want to come across as the bitter husband seeking revenge. I wanted to be the one who opened her eyes to the truth. So I started crafting an anonymous letter, one filled with enough evidence to leave no doubt in her mind about what was going on. I included details only a spouse would know, dates, places, and copies of the messages between Michael and Emma. I didn't sign my name, but I didn't need to. The truth would speak for itself. Once the letter was ready, I mailed it, knowing that the moment Laura opened that envelope, her world would crumble just as mine had. The fallout was almost immediate. A week after I sent the letter, I got a call from Emma. She was frantic, her voice shaking. "John, we need to talk," she said. I could hear the fear in her voice, the desperation. I agreed to meet her, but I already knew what had happened. Laura had confronted Michael, and their affair had been blown wide open. Emma was terrified that her life was falling apart, and for the first time in 20 years, she had lost control. When we met, she was a mess, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling. "It's over," she whispered. "Michael's wife found out. She's leaving him. He doesn't know what to do." I watched her crumble, but instead of feeling sympathy, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. She was finally facing the consequences of her actions, and it was only the beginning. "You brought this on yourself," I said coldly, my voice devoid of emotion. You and Michael lied to everyone for 20 years. Did you really think it would last forever? Emma sobbed, trying to explain, trying to justify what she had done. But I didn't care anymore. I had set the wheels in motion, and now there was no stopping what was about to happen next. Michael's life fell apart overnight. Laura left him, taking their children with her. She filed for divorce almost immediately, and word spread quickly through their social circles. Michael lost friends, his reputation, and even his job after Laura's lawyer exposed the affair in court. Emma, too, was spiraling. She tried to salvage what was left of our marriage, begging me to give her another chance, but I was done. The love I once had for her had been destroyed, replaced by anger, bitterness, and the desire for justice. But I wasn't done yet. After my confrontation with Emma, I didn't immediately kick her out of the house. She thought that my silence meant I was considering forgiving her, but I had no intention of doing that. No, I had bigger plans. Let her think she still had a chance. It only made what was coming next that much more satisfying. In those few days of calm, I started working on the next stage of my revenge. Exposing her affair to Michael's wife was just the beginning. I wanted Emma to feel the kind of betrayal I felt, to lose everything she held dear. I wanted her to know what it was like to have your entire life built on a lie come crumbling down. I started gathering everything: financial records, emails, even the house deed. Everything we owned, everything we had built together. I planned to take from her piece by piece. She would have nothing left by the time I was done. The first real hit came when I withdrew all the money from our joint bank account. Emma didn't notice at first. She had been too busy dealing with the fallout of Michael's ruined life. But when she tried to use her card at a store one evening and was declined, she panicked. She came home, her face pale, asking me if there was a problem with the bank. I told her calmly, "I've moved all the money to a separate account." Her confusion was obvious, but then the realization hit. "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Because you don't deserve any of it," I replied coldly. "It's my money now, Emma. You've lived off my trust for 20 years. It's over." She begged, pleaded, but I was stone-faced. It was only the beginning of what I had in store. Emma's affair had lasted 2 decades, but what I discovered in the weeks that followed made me realize just how deep her betrayal truly went. After taking control of our finances, I went through every transaction we had ever made together. I wanted to know every detail about her secret life with Michael. What I found was a trail of deceit that spanned continents. They hadn't just been sneaking off to motels or fancy restaurants. They had traveled together, sometimes during the same family vacations we took with our kids. I discovered that Emma and Michael had spent a week in Paris when she told me she was visiting her mother. They had gone to the Maldives for work conferences. Even my birthday trips, ones she had so graciously planned, were used as cover for weekends away with him. I could feel my blood boil as I pieced it all together. Every happy memory we had was tainted by her lies. But I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I stored every piece of evidence, every receipt, every plane ticket, and kept building my case. It wasn't enough to destroy her emotionally. I wanted to ruin her reputation, too. Just as I was wrapping my head around the years of deceit, I uncovered something that made me question everything. It happened by accident. I was going through old family photos on my computer, trying to see which trips coincided with her getaways with Michael. That's when I stumbled upon a folder marked with the year my youngest son, Ethan, was born. There were photos from the hospital, from our time bringing him home, and then, mixed in, there were emails between Emma and Michael. I opened one. It was dated just before Ethan's birth. "Do you think he's mine?" Michael had written. I felt the room spin around me as I read her reply. "I don't know," she had responded. "But if he is, I can't tell John. It would destroy him." I dropped my phone, my hands shaking, while rising in my throat. My mind raced, connecting the dots. Emma had been with Michael long before Ethan was conceived. Was he even my son? I had loved him, raised him, and now I didn't even know if he was mine. That night, I confronted Emma. She had no choice but to admit it. There was a possibility that Ethan wasn't mine. She had been seeing Michael all throughout our marriage, even when we were trying to conceive. She claimed not to know for sure, but the damage was done. The man I had raised for 17 years, the boy I had loved like my own, might be another man's child. It was the final nail in the coffin. The next few weeks were a blur. I ordered a DNA test, and the waiting nearly drove me insane. I tried to act normal around Ethan, but every time I looked at him, I saw Michael's face, Michael's touch on everything that should have been mine. When the results came back, it felt like time stopped. I remember opening the envelope with trembling hands, afraid of what I might find. And there it was, the truth, stark and cold. Ethan wasn't mine. I collapsed into a chair, staring at the paper as if it could somehow rewrite itself, as if the result could change. But it wouldn't. No amount of wishing could change the fact that my son, the boy I had raised, wasn't mine. When I told Emma, she broke down completely. She cried, begged for forgiveness, told me how much she regretted everything. But I didn't have any forgiveness left in me. I couldn't look at her without seeing the years of lies, the affair, the son who wasn't mine. She had taken everything from me, my trust, my family, my future. I had nothing left but the desire to finish what I had started. It wasn't enough to leave Emma. I wanted her to lose everything, just like I had. I wanted her to know what it felt like to be utterly alone, to have everything you've built ripped away. The first step was filing for divorce. I made sure it was as public as possible, listing every affair, every betrayal in the documents. I didn't care if it embarrassed me. I wanted the world to see her for what she was. Then I moved on to the house. The mortgage was in my name, so I sold it right out from under her. She had no claim to it. When she came home one evening to find her things packed up on the front lawn, she looked at me in shock. "You can't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "I just did," I replied coldly. "You're not welcome here anymore." She had nowhere to go. Michael didn't want her. His life had fallen apart too, and he wasn't about to take her in. I watched her as she crumbled, finally realizing that the life she had known was gone for good. The hardest part of all of this was Ethan. He didn't know what was going on. Not really. I hadn't told him the truth about his paternity. I didn't know how to, or if I should. But the day came when I had no choice. He came to me one night, asking why things were so tense between me and his mother, why everything felt like it was falling apart. I looked into his eyes, the eyes of a boy who had called me Dad his entire life, and I knew I couldn't lie to him. So I told him the truth. I told him about Emma's affair, about Michael, and finally, about the DNA test. I told him that I wasn't his biological father. His face crumpled as the weight of what I said hit him. "So, you don't want me anymore?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. My heart broke in that moment. "No," I said, pulling him into a hug. "I'm still your dad. I'll always be your dad. This doesn't change that." We cried together that night. I didn't know how to navigate this new reality, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to abandon him. No matter what. In the months that followed, Emma's life continued to unravel. She moved in with a friend, working odd jobs to get by. We finalized the divorce, and I got full custody of Ethan. Our relationship was strained, but we were trying to rebuild, trying to find a way to move forward in the wreckage of what had been. As for Emma, I don't know where her path will lead. She lost me, she lost Ethan, and she lost Michael. In the end, her lies caught up with her, and she paid the price. It took a long time for me to heal. Some days, the anger still flares up, but it doesn't control me anymore. I've learned to live with the scars, to move on from the betrayal. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine again. And this time, I know the truth.